Welcome back, everybody. In this next set of videos, we're going to start talking about pivot tables. So lately, we've been using data ranges in Excel, or then converting those data ranges into tables. And both are really helpful. So there's another kind of table in Excel called a pivot table that we can also create. And it's actually a way to do sort of like if functions very quickly. So it allows us to compare and dissect different parts of the data. Again, very, very quickly. So instead of having to constantly filter the data or look at many different if functions, we can do a lot of that work, again, much faster and in a nice visual way as well. So let me show you what a pivot table looks like and how to create one. So I'm in our Unit 7 data set here. And we have the dashboard page, remember? Oh, let's kind of get out of this for a second. And this is the this document here, Sirmosta. And we're going to go to the media log where we have our table of data. So we just have a regular data set here. So I'm going to go ahead and just select the corner of that data set, just B4, to let Excel know that I'm looking at this data set here. And I'm going to go ahead and create a pivot table based on this data. Okay, so my data is already in Excel. It's already in a data range or a table or something similar to that. So it's already readily available. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to Insert. And you can see on the left here, they have pivot table and they also have recommended pivot tables. So I'm going to go through the pivot table option, but I do want to point out first that recommended pivot tables can kind of help you get started. So what it does is it gives you some different breakdowns of data that they think that you may want to compare. By they, I mean, the Excel program. So for instance, this pivot table compares the different sites, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, with the number of the followers at each site. Let's close these out. Or for instance, this one here looks at the different types of attire and the views. So you can see that you're comparing and breaking down parts of the data set here. So our pivot table typically is not going to be the entire data set, although I guess it could be, but usually it's more because you're trying to compare parts of that data set and look at patterns in the data. So recommended pivot tables is a good place to start if you're kind of not sure what you want your pivot table to look like, or often pivot tables. So we may often create more than one to look at different breakdowns of the data. So again, this is a good place to start if you need some like a jumping off point or kind of not sure what you want to compare yet. So it gives you some different options here to get started. So I'm going to go in and show you how to create our own though. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to click the down arrow. I think it's easier just to click the pivot table box and then the screen will open. Here it is saying media. Remember that was the name of the table that we had here. We called this table media. So they're acknowledging that we're bringing in the entire table. And you can also see that dashed line going around the table as well to indicate that that's what we're bringing in here. Now you can create a new worksheet for your pivot tables to go to, or you can use one of the existing worksheets in your workbook. Either is fine. I'm going to follow along with your text, and they do ask us to use an existing worksheet. And they want us to put our pivot table on the Data Explore sheet. So if you look at the bottom here, we have a Data Explore sheet. And what I can do is I can just click that sheet, and then I'm going to select to put it in box B6, or the start of it in box B6. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And you'll see that it brings me to that page. So this is my data exploration sheet here. And this is a blank pivot table. So there's nothing here yet. So we're going to actually choose what we want to be in our pivot table. So you can see here on the right, for instance, all of those title headers that we had, date, post, site, followers, topic, views, likes, comments, etc. They all come in here that we can choose from. And we can select where we want them placed. So we could have them represented as rows or columns, or some value here. The values feature is when we're doing a calculation. So Excel will default to adding or counting, but you can change this later on to things like averages, mins, or maxes, and so on. So I'll look at that later. And we'll go through a few videos together about pivot tables and how to work with them and different features that you can use here. All right, so let's actually go ahead and just start playing around and go in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name. So if you go back up here to pivot table on the top and hit the down button, this is the name. So it will usually name it as like pivot table 1, pivot table 2, 3, etc. So it'll just keep counting down the line. And we're going to call this explore pivot table. And once you have the name, you can just hit enter and it will rename that pivot table for you. And then let's just kind of, again, play around a little bit with it. So one thing that your text asks you to do is it asks you to select the post label. So again, remember, one of those columns were the number of posts at, the different sites and so on, and have it go to the values section. So we're just, again, kind of playing around here. So notice if I put it in the values section, this little symbol here is a Greek letter S, and it stands for sum in mathematics. So it automatically sums up all the posts. And again, we can tweak what that function is. It will always default to start as a sum or a count, but we can change that later. So where this is just the count of all the posts, right? So we can kind of just do just basic calculations here as like a little mini table. Now, maybe I want to break this down a little bit more though. So I'm going to also drag the site field. So these are called fields here. So for site, meaning Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So those are the ones that we did into the column section. And then what happens here is you notice that you have different columns now for the different sites. So you still get that grand total at the end here of your post, but you also have that breakdown. So if I take the site and I remove it, I can remove it just by bringing it anywhere on the screen, like any of other cells, it will go away. It just gives me the total count of all the posts. But if I bring the site down here into my columns, it will break it down now by the number of posts. Again, that was my topic, posts in each of those sites, and then it will still give me that grand total. So this is a really nice, fast way to kind of filter your data or to avoid having to use constant if functions if you want to do it a lot of different ways, right? If you're just doing one quick function, you're like, I know what I need, then that's fine. But the pivot table is really nice. It's easy to fix and change. So it's very visual as well. And you can see it in real time, right? You're not stuck with trying to plug in different filters or if functions to see if they work. It's like you can just drag and drop and say, oh, is this what I was looking for? And then your book also suggests taking the topic and bringing that into rows. So remember, our topic here was the different kinds of attire. So now you have it broken out 2 different ways. So you have your posts. So we're still talking about posts altogether, but now we're breaking it down by Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and also with what they were talking about, which kind of attire. So you still have that Facebook total is 332, the Instagram total is 303, and so on. The total number of posts is 785, but now I have it broken down in this nice 2-way table here as well. So again, you can really just kind of play around with how you want your data to look, right? So maybe I don't want the topic here. Maybe that's not what I'm interested in. I could remove the idea of topic instead, and maybe I want to look at those profit groups. And notice too that as I remove items, they select or deselect. So profit group is selected as well as site and post because those are being used right now. So our profit group was high or low. If you remember from some previous videos, we talked about posts that brought in more higher profit versus lower profit for those attire items. So now we're broken down by high and low instead of specifically business attire, nightwear, activewear, whatever it was, and casual attire as well. Maybe I don't really want to look at posts, so I can remove posts. Maybe instead I want to look at shares. So I'm more interested in shares. So now again, I'm still breaking it down column-wise by the different sites. Row-wise, my breakdown is based on my profit group, but my overall data here is shares. So that's what's going in that values column is kind of like what's the main piece that I'm comparing. And then my columns and rows are how I'm breaking that data down. You can also add multiple fields to your columns or to your rows or to your sum values here as well. So it's kind of just fun to try to play around. So for instance, let's take the profit group and instead put it in columns as well. And I'm going to put it above the site group. And now you can see how it changed, right? So we've created new columns here of the profit group as well, instead of making it a row. And then maybe I want to make my row here about the dates. So I can drag that there, and now I have it broken down by months. And I can click the plus sign and it will break it down even further by day. I can click the minus sign and again, it'll go back to just months here. So you can really kind of get in here and play around, as we mentioned. So here again, our overall topic is in the values piece. So everything here is about shares, and then we're breaking it down by date. And when you do date up here, it does also add in an additional item for months automatically. So this was done automatically, and that's why you see that in the rows piece here. So you can break it down further by individual day, but when you do that date one, the months came in automatically. I did not create the months one myself. And again, the nice thing to note here too is by playing around with the order, you can see how it changes the view, right? So if I put site in first and then the profit group second, it does change how this looks, right? So the site is sort of like the main piece here. So you're getting those totals. So here's the high and the low for each Facebook, high and the low for each Instagram, and so on. Whereas if I bring the profit group in first as kind of like the lead on the columns, you're getting Facebook, Instagram, Twitter all high first, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter all low next. So it just depends on what you're looking for. So you can even play around with the different orderings of the columns or rows and breakdowns to see if there's one that is more helpful than the other, because it does slightly change the way it looks. Another thing you can do here, so again, I showed how you have that plus or minus for the months here. If you would like the plus or minus box to go away, you could actually unselect date. And by unselecting date, it still leaves months because months was brought in there. And then that allows, or I guess it doesn't allow the user to break that down further. So if you would like to eliminate that piece, maybe you're doing a presentation or sharing this data and you don't need the daily breakdown, you can also eliminate that. So you can click on and off things here as well. And then if I need to, I can drag it back in as needed, right? So just some things to think around that. It does take a little bit of playing around here. And to move your different fields, you can just drag and drop, or if you find you're having trouble, you can also click to the right of them and then select move up or move down or move to beginning and move to the end as well. So sometimes dragging and dropping is a little bit tough. So you can use your move up, down, beginning and end features there too. But just make it a little bit easier. All right, so let me show you one more thing in this video so it doesn't get too long on you guys. And I just want to show you how to filter as well. So you know how there is a filters tab here. Now, some of these get added in automatically. So when you do columns and rows, you do see those filter tabs get added in. So you could filter from here and say, okay, I only want to see high, and that will change your table. Or again, you can hit select all and it will show you both categories. Same thing here with your row labels. You could filter here and say, okay, I really just want to see January, February, and March, and that table will update. And notice that all your totals update as well. So again, it makes it so easy to focus on parts of data and break it down without having to worry so much about the functions and the filters in as much detail. So pivot tables, I think, are super nice and fun to work with and just to play around with. And you can apply both filters at once. So, let's say I just want to do January and February here, and I just want to look at my low values. I can even just break it down to those pieces. So again, it's really nice to have those filters. And you can also add filters in as well for other things. So the column and the row ones are typically going to be automatically put in for you, although we can remove them. Okay, so let me put those back. but you can add in others. So let's say I have my table here, but I'd really like to be able to filter this by topic. So I can go to here, and then what I can do is I can add topic into filters, and you can see right here that I added in an additional filter. So then I can select that and say, okay, maybe I just want to see casual attire. And again, I'm looking at my data now just for casual attire. Or maybe I want to see just sportswear, and I'm looking at my data now for just sportswear. And you can hit the checkbox here to select multiple things. If you want to look at nightwear and sportswear together, you have that piece as well. And again, it's just a nice way that you can kind of play around here. Now notice here when I select nightwear, the low disappears because remember nightwear was a high category. So again, it updates appropriately depending on what you select for your topic, right? So you can go ahead and you can apply your filters that way as well. All right, so I'll let you guys play around with that on your own. If you were done with this particular filter, you could always remove it afterwards. So you can just bring it over here to the sheet and just put it anywhere, you know, not on the table, and it will remove it for you. Again, you can bring it back in, or you could try a different filter as well. So these are, again, pretty helpful, which I think is nice. All right, the last thing I want to show you too as well on the pivot table analyze feature. So let's say you have, you know, a bunch of these filters selected here. Again, I'm just kind of play around for a second, and I have some filters selected. So maybe I'm just looking at those two as well. I'm going to click my table again. So if you ever lose some of your topics up here, just click your table and you'll see that pivot table analyze will come back. So you can go ahead and you can click that as well. And then under actions, if you click clear, you can also clear your filters there. So if you want to go back to the start and you kind of don't remember what you did, or maybe you did so much that you don't want to clear everything individually, you can go up here to your pivot table analyze and hit clear and clear those filters out as well, and start back over. I'm going to get rid of profit group as well there. Kind of go back to here, and now you can see my column labels. I have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as the lead now, right? So I'm able to sort that way. And again, you can kind of come in here and play around with different filters and different combinations of data. Like, do I want it in the rows? Do I want it in the columns? Because it gives it different appearances, right? Or maybe easier to read in one format than the other.